Welcome to the Deep Specialization Podcast, the show where we blend focus, strategy, and client intimacy in order to scale and simplify our businesses and our lives. I'm your host, Corey Quinn. Let's jump into the show. Welcome back to the Deep Specialization Podcast. Today, I am thrilled to have a repeat visitor join us who is a true expert in growing digital agencies. His name is Jon Morris, and he's the founder and CEO of Fiscal Advocate, which is a company providing decision-making software and services for professional services firms. And he focuses on critical metrics such as cash, profit, and revenue, what they call their CPR score. I'd love to have you share more about that, Jon. And then also, before we hit record, what we talked about is all you do, your primary focus in the business and the work you do with your clients and the firm's clients is help them to improve decision-making. So we're going to go deep on innovation today. I'm excited about that. A little bit more before we jump in, Jon, about your background, why you're super relevant for this podcast and this audience. You are the CEO and founder behind Rise Interactive, which you started in 2004. You grew from a one-man shop to a leading independent marketing agency that you later sold. And you can actually, listeners can listen to your entire journey on our previous episode where we uncovered your entire journey, the highs, the lows, and all the lessons learned. So I encourage listeners to go check that out on the Deep Specialization podcast. But as I mentioned, today we're having a discussion around the role of innovation and agency growth. Okay, that's enough introduction. Hey, Jon, good to see you, buddy.
It's great to be back, Corey. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah, absolutely, bro. So let's talk about innovation from a high level. We'll kind of jump right in. I think, in 2025, a lot of folks in the agency, professional services space, but definitely in the agency space, are saying, no, it's a tough year. It's been a tough year. It's been a tough environment for a lot of agencies. A lot of sort of budgets have been squeezed. Drawing from your experience in starting off Rise way back when, 2004, as a solo business owner, how should an agency today prioritize innovation spending with keeping in mind not breaking the bank? Like, how do you do that? How do you recommend folks do that?
So the first thing I just want to point out, there are 120,000 agencies just in the United States. This is a crazy crowded space.
Yeah.
And, at Rise, I used to think we were really special. And I guarantee you, every CEO of every agency thinks they're special. We're not special. Like, we are very similar to our competition. And there are hundreds or thousands of competitors doing what you do, just in your area, your niche, your specialization. And so unless you want to compete on price, which just means that you're going to have to keep on lowering your price, you have to start creating a unique value proposition, something that allows you to charge more. Now, in this economy right now that's getting tougher, there's AI that's disrupting people that might bring more insourcing. I believe there are two things that are really important. I'll go into all these different elements, but the first one is you need an ideal client profile. So you need to figure out who are you going to serve, and ideally that you're going to improve the experience and the results for that specific group. And then how are you going to innovate, both in terms of your service offering and your innovation, specifically for that ideal client profile. Now, in terms of not breaking the bank, every single dollar that you that you receive, so basically, no matter how much revenue you have, let's just say you have 10 million in revenue, every dollar should be allocated to a specific area. You get 50% to service your customers. Well, you get 5% for innovation. That's the minimum of what I want you to spend. It is not breaking the bank, provided you live within the other buckets. If you're overspending one of those other buckets, then it's going to be hard to spend money on innovation. So it's a holistic view of your finances, but you get 5% of your revenue dedicated towards innovation, and that has to be dedicated towards that ideal client profile and to improve the experience and the results.
So where should that 5% come from? Should that come from OpEx? You look to be more lean? Should that come from profit? Like, where should this 5% be allocated from, do you think?
So there's two different ways. And this is something, because I'm not a CPA, so you need to talk to your tax accountant about this.
Yeah.
Ideally, you can capitalize this investment in innovation, which means it's a balance sheet item as opposed to an income statement item. So you can still have your 20% EBITDA, but it will reduce your cash. And so ideally, you're having a 20% EBITDA. And then when you think about, there's something called a call on earnings. So like, what do you do with your profit? And I want you to take 5% of that revenue, so a good portion or 25% of your profits, and dedicate that towards reinvesting back into the business to innovate, to make your services better.
Okay, beautiful. I love that. And why do you suggest focusing on an ICP first before you make this investment in an innovation? Why is that important? Why not just innovate?
That's an awesome question. So I'm gonna speak about some of my own mistakes.
Yeah.
So at Rise, we focused on, four main verticals: retail, education, finance, and healthcare was predominantly who we focused on. But we took clients from everywhere. We had B2B clients, B2C clients, lead gen clients, you name it, across the board, we serviced them. Now, we built an 8-figures platform. So we invested very heavily in innovation. I had 25 people just dedicated to my innovation team when I was there. It grew to over 50 people after I left. So just to give you an idea of the size and scale.
Yeah.
And part of our analytics platform is we had to connect to a bunch of APIs. So about 20% of my clients were retail or e-commerce, and they cared very deeply about marketplaces. So like Amazon, Walmart, Target, Instacart, etc. Took us about 6 months of coding and development work to connect with all those APIs. There's only one problem. That was 20% of my customers. That means that over a 6-month period of 25 dedicated people, 80% of my customers saw no value in that innovation. Then we did the same thing, but we did it for all of our B2B connections. By the way, another 20% of our customers. So another 80% saw no benefit to that innovation. So when you are innovating, what you want to think about is what percent of your customers and what percent of your prospective customers will benefit from that innovation. And so if you don't have an ideal client profile, you're gonna water down the impact of your innovation.
So I'll give you an anecdote from my time at Scorpion, because we also were very software driven. That was how we were able to scale up. Our target audience were local businesses like attorneys and plumbers and so on and so forth, which were lower revenue per client, more volume of clients, but we had to be extremely efficient. So one of the things that we did to help assist us with that, with servicing those clients, was we built a lot of internal software that would help us to scale and to be able to sell. Ultimately, we sold 600 deals per quarter. That's how many new clients. And so you can't manage that volume of new clients and maintain quality and maintain retention and a great reputation, all that stuff. And so software was a big part of what we did. And one of the vertical markets that we were very interested in investing in and growing was the medical industry. This is on top of the legal industry, which we were building software for, the home services industry, which we were building software for, and the franchise or multi-local industry, all of which we had investments in building software and analytics tools and dashboards and all this great stuff. The challenge that we faced with medical is, to your point, the medical industry, when you service dentists, they have a tremendous amount of technology platforms that they expect you as an agency, as a specialist agency, to tie into. You also have HIPAA. You have all of these requirements that at the end of the day, while there was a lot of potential revenue for us to go acquire in medical, we decided not to invest in medical after actually going down the road for a while. We learned this the hard way. We went to conferences, we hired sales teams, and we did a bunch of stuff and client services teams for medical. We ended up backing out of that because the amount of investment that would require us to be able to be successful in medical was a zero-sum game for us. So if we were investing in medical, we were not investing those resources in building our software for our other kind of more established verticals. So that was our decision, because we can't do everything.
Exactly. That's a perfect example of how to say no,
Yes. Right.
to make sure that
Yes.
your innovation is impactful.
Yes. Awesome. You mentioned AI, and I want to get your perspective on, does AI in your pose a real risk to agencies? And, if so, how?
Yes and no. It is a massive opportunity and it is a massive threat. The reality is that the speed of which we are able to do things is faster now than it ever was before. And there are going to be companies that are going to invest in leveraging AI to make things substantially more efficient, to make it different. And there are companies that are going to be slow to do so. There are also going to be more tools that come out that are going to make it easier for people to do it internally as opposed to hiring an agency. So what you really have to think about is, based on what you do, where are you on the roadmap of leveraging AI into your ecosystem so that you can do things at a faster rate or a higher quality rate than you currently are doing? And so I don't think the agency is going to be, I think that there's always going to be a need for hiring an external partner to help you with your marketing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that marketing is going to go away. However, the volume of work that comes out of an agency might become higher. The process that you do it might become easier for your customer. Like, there's all sorts of cool things that you can do when you leverage AI to, provide a better experience and better results for your customer. But if you don't take advantage of that, I think you're going to get disrupted pretty quickly.
Any suggestions around how agencies should be leaning into AI? Obviously, we're talking about innovation today. AI is as it relates to agencies. Many agencies have adopted at some level, the generative AI part of AI, right? The part where they can create blog posts really quickly. They can create personalized content. What are some different ways that agencies should be kind of pushing the envelope outside of this kind of bread and butter approach?
So I'm going to speak at a little bit of a higher level to get to a more detailed level.
Great.
Okay, so we started with, you need an ideal client profile.
Yeah.
The next thing is, in my opinion, there's only two things you want to innovate for as it relates to that ideal client profile: the experience that your clients have and the results that you deliver for them. The third one could be the profitability that you manage the account, but let's just focus on the experience and the results.
Okay.
So I believe that if you are delivering amazing results for your client, but you're a pain in the butt to work with, you're going to eventually get fired. And if the experience is absolutely incredible, but the results are lackluster, you're probably going to get fired. So I think you need to invest in both. Once you come up with that, the next thing is, we talked about, is you need to dedicate budget to actually innovating. So these are foundational pieces that you need to start with before we even talk about AI or what you do with AI. The next thing is, you need to build the right team. Okay, so actually, even before that, there are two different ways that you can innovate. The first way is product development. You just talked about it. Scorpion, you built a lot of software. Fiscal Advocate builds software. Rise Interactive builds software. And there are team members that are unique to building software. So you need engineers, you need UX experts, and you need product owners. And those are kind of like the core three that you build around. The other way is something called service design. Just so you know, you can get a degree in service design. There are colleges that offer degrees in this. And I like to reverse the wording. It means designing your service to improve the experience and the results for your ideal client profile. That's my vision of service design. And there are 4 elements to service design. The first element is building out standard operating procedures. The second one is that for every standard operating procedure, there are going to be templates and there are going to be standard deliverables. And I'll just give you an example. If you build out a standard operating procedure for onboarding new clients, every new client is going to receive a welcome email. I'd be shocked if they don't receive a welcome email. But you can templatize that and be like, this is what our standard, welcome email looks like. And we're going to introduce the team. We're going to have a Calendly link so that you can, schedule your first meeting. What are the elements there are that go into that welcome email? And the next one is workflow automation and AI. So once you have the standard operating procedure and you have the standard templates, this is where you can start determining, what can we automate as opposed to having humans do it. And the last one, and I don't know if this is the most important one, but it's the most often forgotten one, is adherence to the standard operating procedure.
So good.
And I can't tell you how many times as we scaled from 1 to 250 employees, that someone would come to me and is like, I had the greatest idea for the standard operating procedure. And I was like, we're on our 4th time of trying to implement that. And through the growth, it got lost. That's on me as a failure to build a standard operating procedure that stood the test of time to existing and new employees. And so when you think about your team that's dedicated to putting your service design together, you need people who build out your SOPs, people who build out your templates and your standard deliverables, people who do workflow automation and AI, and people who do change management and ensuring that people are actually incorporating all of these different elements. So I didn't give you a single thing about what you should build in terms of AI next, but I'm going to give you a story, and this is how I know when you're doing a good job.
Okay.
When we were small at Rise, let's just say 10 to 20 employees, I would walk around and I would take my employees, stop them, and at random ask them a ton of questions. Like, what's our mission? What's our vision? What clients are you working on? What are you doing for your clients? A whole series. I'm sure it was very stressful for them. But whenever I asked them what they were working on, they would say to me, oh, I got this client. I'm doing SEO and paid search for them. I was like, oh, well, tell me what you're doing for SEO. I was like, oh, we're restructuring their title tags. I just finished their meta tags. We took their code from this to that. They tell me all these details. And paid search is like, oh, and we optimized their account. And what I learned about optimizing their account was that was code for they did nothing.
Busy work.
And I find the same thing when you ask people what they're doing for AI or what they're doing for innovation, where it's like, oh, we put a committee together. We're going to rewrite all of our SOPs for the year. That to me is code for you're doing nothing.
Yeah.
When you can start saying, we have a prioritization roadmap. We're focusing right now on automating the weekly reports that we deliver through our clients through an AI interface, and we build a database, and we're using RAG, which automatically improves the process of your LLM. And you can speak in specifics. I'm like, okay, they got something. This is real. And so to me, I don't care what it is, but just start developing a list of all the things you can do as you get this team together. The first thing might be I'm putting the team together, but you want 2-week sprints, you want an agile framework, and you want to have releases of things that you're improving, whether it's on the service or the product side.
So a couple follow-up questions here, just kind of feedback. That there's 2 primary areas where it's called leverage within an agency, which is experience and results.
Yeah.
If you're able to improve the experience exponentially, improve the results over time, then that's going to add more value. It's going to improve retention, which will of course improve your positioning and differentiation and all those good things. A couple ways to approach improving experience and results is through service design, which is designing the service, the 4 steps. Standard SOPs, templates and deliverables, workflow automation and AI, and then adherence. Should this live across the organization? Should the delivery team be focused, have ownership in this service design, and should sales own this? Who in the organization owns it? Is it cross departments, or is there a separate department that kind of owns this and then works individually with the departments?
I believe that this needs to be a separate owner, and that there needs to be a head of innovation or a head of R&D that reports to the CEO. And then just like in product development, where you'll have stakeholders, Like you might have a stakeholder on the client delivery team or on the sales team that provides input to the product owner. You need someone that is providing input across this organization so that you know what service to work on next to improve, you know what you're building, et cetera. I think a lot of your audience will probably relate to this because a lot of them are marketers. And what they often try to do is to market themselves is they assign their client service team themselves as a client. And they find over and over and over again that they just are the last priority relative to their client work.
Yep.
So if you're not going to build a dedicated team, and by the way, you have to build the right team. Another quick story. I took our best digital marketer and put them in charge of our technology the first time. And we spent over $1 million and we ended up flushing every 1 and 0 down the toilet because I didn't hire the right people. And so it wasn't until I did a full RFP, so to speak, and had 4 finalists who really knew how to build technology that I learned how to build technology. And I hired Brent Laufenberger, who became our CTO. And so you got to build the right team in order to make sure that this does its job and you do it appropriately.
So if we're talking about 5% to invest in this innovation, you're probably talking about larger agencies who can really hire the right team to not only have the right leader, but the right folks on the team to be able to really have a lasting impact. What about for those agencies that maybe that 5% doesn't represent enough of an investment level to bring in a separate team? How should they approach this?
Look, let's just say you're $1 million company. So that gives you a $50,000 budget.
Yeah.
A lot of times you have to wear multiple hats as a small organization. So
that's right.
You might be the CEO and the head of innovation. And you might hire an engineer in, Latin America or a market that's more affordable than the United States.
Yeah.
And so you still have to invest the 5%. You just have to be thrifty and, creative of how you can get the most impact. But what I want you to think about is if you're $1 million company and you're spending $50,000, and I'll talk about how you can analyze the ROI of that $50,000 or whatever you spend in a second. But, you should have a competitive advantage over time relative to the other $1 million company that didn't spend that $50,000.
Right.
So as long as you're focused on the right thing, going back to experience and results in your ideal client profile, you should be putting yourselves in a good position down the road.
Yep. I recently interviewed Khushbu, who is the chief operating officer over at E2M.
Okay.
And we had an interesting conversation about AI, and she shared a couple of things that they're doing. So they're a white label solution for agencies.
Yep.
And they have hundreds of agencies, and they've got a lot of workers, hundreds of workers, and they've really brought AI into the forefront of the culture of the business. And so a couple of things that she shared, just kind of additive to what you're sharing, is this concept around when do you make an investment in AI? Well, let's say, for example, the example she shared was if your team takes 15 hours a week to do lead gen, let's just call it, right, for yourself or for whomever, and you're investing those 15 hours every week, that's a cost, but it's for a functional benefit of your business. And you looked at potentially developing an AI or an innovative solution that would ultimately take those 15 hours down 2 to 3 hours, but it would cost you 50 hours of work.
Yeah.
Do you want to make that investment? In other words, it's an additional 50 hours of work, but at the end of which the expectation is you go from 15 hours a week to down to 2 to 3. In that situation, of course, you make that investment.
Yeah.
Right? And so you have to approach it on the basis of what is the expected outcome? What is the what's the measurement of success? And then what is it going to cost us relative to our current expense to be able to experience that success? Yeah.
I'll bring that into a financial world.
Beautiful.
So I generally deal with 2 companies that are financially distressed, and then companies that have hit a plateau and want to grow faster, but they don't know how. And the second group, to grow faster, is a math problem. There are only 4 numbers or 4 metrics to improve that will allow you to grow faster. You either win more clients, you increase the average order value of those clients, you reduce your churn, or you upsell more. So when I talk about improving the experience or the results, one of those 4 metrics should change, if not all of them, by this innovation that you're investing in.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one thing to focus on. The second thing to focus on, and I'm focusing on the client work, but I'll get to where you go with the sales and marketing side at some point also, is I'm a very big believer that one of the most important, if not the most important metric to understand is your gross margin, how profitably you serve your customers. And so another avenue would be, how much will this improve your gross margin? Let me use your example, but just say it's a report that you provide to your clients on a weekly basis. And it takes you 100 hours a week for all your clients. And it's going to take you 10 hours now by doing this.
Right.
You want to look at your payback time. But, this is literally how I manage the innovation at Rise. So I explained to you about the flaw of the innovation of like 80% didn't get served.
Right.
What I didn't explain was what our focus was. Our focus was on gross margin improvement. And so I would look at how many hours it took to build out the reports for our clients, for all of our marketplace clients. And I'd be like, okay, that's 1,000 hours a month. By me building this, I now can go from 1,000 to 0. And then I would go to the next group and I'd be like, I'm going from 700 to 0. And so I was taking chunks of time and reducing the amount of time I needed to spend so I could improve my gross margin. So I was really going for a gross margin advantage, was my product roadmap and the way I designed it.
Yep.
That's very similar to your sales strategy. But then what I would ask a different question. Not does it take 50 hours and goes down to, or 50 hours to develop and I'm going to go from 15 to 2 hours. I would ask, well, how many more clients am I going to get from this? Like by turning this on, am I going to get, can I now 10x my outreach? And so am I going to get more meetings out of this? And so the idea is that when you spend money on innovation, it's got to have an impact somewhere. Yes. And you want it to see in your income statement, is it improving your profitability? Is it improving your revenue? Is it reducing your churn, et cetera?
So that actually reminds me of something I was remembering before our call about innovation, this idea of innovation. Scorpion had a very innovative culture. It was baked into everything we did, as led by the founder. I managed a 30-person marketing team, and our primary focus was generating new revenue. It was closing new deals. It wasn't on the margin. It wasn't on retention. Our pure focus was on top line, getting new logos, let's call it, into the business. And as a 30-person company working at a environment where we wanted to grow very quickly, we did a lot of things. Yeah. We did webinars, conferences, content, direct response, outbound, email marketing. And while we were very busy, things would come back to me, like somebody on the team would say, hey, we sent this email blast out to 10,000 attorneys and it had 5 typos in it. I was like, oh, great. Or we printed up a brand new booth for this big conference and we misspelled Scorpion. Or on and on, right? Yeah. So the place where we had to get to, and me as the leader of this group, that was, we were investing on 30 people. We had big marketing campaigns. We had a $6 million budget. The point is that there was a lot of money and a lot of moving parts. What we had to do, what I did to address the quality issue, is that we had to think about what are the key principles for that everything that we do must apply to. It came down to an acronym, and it was QISR, which you can say is KISSR, which is probably a PR or an HR violation, I have to say. But it is Q. The first thing that you do as a writer, as a social media marketing person, as any person on my team, The first thing is Q, and that stands for quality.
Yeah.
We don't do things cheap. We have a premium brand. It must look good. You must invest in the experience of whatever it is. Number two is innovation. It must be innovative. And what that meant to us was you can't just rinse and repeat what you did last time. You had to take what you did last time, look at the impact, and make changes. Make it different. Make it better. Make it 10% better, 5% better every single time you do, let's say, a repetitive task. S was speed. We moved quickly. You have to get a lot of work done in a short period of time. It's the culture we had. In order for us to hit our aggressive growth goals, you have to work quickly. The R at the end of it was results, which is anything you do, an email that you send, a gift that you send to a prospect, everything must have some measurable result tied back to it, or else you're just going to be sending out emails and checking the box and moving on to the next thing. Every single thing we did had to apply to this KISSER formula. And the reason why I bring this up, it was because it includes innovation, always trying to improve, but it also includes results. In other words, everything you do has to be tied to some measurable impact, or else I'm not going to approve it and you're not going to do it.
First of all, I love it. But we had TCA, which was timely, complete, and accurate. But what I would say is, look, to build a culture of innovation, I absolutely believe in the balance of quality and results.
Yes.
But what you also have to do is reward people for trying things and accept that some of those things might not produce results, other than the result is not to do it again. So
sure, that's a result.
Yeah, I'll give you an example. I have an idea right now that I think is worthy of testing, but I have zero data on this right now. So here's the general idea: that I believe in investing in top of funnel marketing and advertising. And that when someone looks to buy something, I don't care if they look to buy a pen, a soccer ball, a digital marketing agency, only 3 to 5 brands get recalled at a moment that someone is ready to make a decision to buy it. And so how do you make it so that your company is recognized and recalled? So here are the steps that I believe. The first one is that you need an ideal client profile. The second one is that you need to develop a list. You need to make sure that that is a really thorough, well thought out list, that there's no waste in that list that you're going to, build. The third is there are a whole series of ways to do advertising on list audiences. So you can upload to LinkedIn, to Facebook, to Instagram. You can do connected TV. You can do internet radio. You can do programmatic, where you only advertise on that list. And the idea is over the course of a year or the course of 2 years or maybe even 3 years, you swap out the creative every 6 to 12 weeks. You are doing top of funnel, pure branding type initiatives with the idea that when someone is ready to buy, that you are top of mind in that decision set.
Yeah. I
have zero data to support this. Okay, this is just an idea that I have that I think is sound. Like, it's the right ideal client profile. I understand that there's only 3 to 5 people that get called during a decision set. And I want to make sure that my client, that I'm thought of during that process. So to me, like, if someone else came up with that idea and they had a good argument, the R is, we believe that by building a brand, it'll be helpful. But I'm very open to taking those chances, knowing that that might be a complete failure. It might be a horrible idea. But if we don't test that, you'll never find that next breakthrough. Right? Like, what if that idea?
The data.
Yeah. What if that idea is a home run? And all of a sudden my list goes from 1,000 people to 10,000 people to 100,000 people. And, it's very similar to the gifting idea with your cookies, at Scorpion, which turned into a huge idea.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, when you set the first batch, you didn't know if it was going to work.
No, it was purely a let's see what happens type of approach. There was no science, no data behind it. It was a hunch.
Yeah.
Right. In speaking about your ICP, and you mentioned this earlier, I want to share something that is, based on my experience, a benefit of starting with an ICP as it
Yeah.
relates to innovation. Okay. A lot of the work that we did at Scorpion and now I work with clients is around this idea of becoming a specialist in a vertical market to do things like become one of those 3 to 5 brands that get recalled when when your ICP is ready to buy.
Yeah.
One of the areas of focus for us, this is a big strategic focus for us, was personal injury attorneys at Scorpion.
Yeah.
And these are the folks who specifically they are looking for mass tort type of cases. These are the
Yeah.
mesothelioma,
Yeah.
$1,000 cost per click. These folks are very sought after by agencies because they have big budgets. They want to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
They are aggressive, like all the things a forward-looking agency would really want. Well, through our specialization in attorneys and personal injury, and specifically in mass torts, we understood them at a deep level. We were able to focus. We didn't have to spread our focus in multiple verticals or industries. We got to spend a lot of time with them. As a result of that, that generated a lot of familiarity and client intimacy with them.
Yeah.
What we did with that is we created a product that was specifically built for mass tort attorneys. We named it as and I forget what it is specifically, but it's like the mass tort case system or something
Yeah.
to that effect. And as a result of that specificity, this unique product that solved this unique pain point for this specific audience, it allowed us to break through all of the noise because finally they found someone who understood their situation, their pain point, and knew what they wanted.
Yeah.
As a result of that, we were able to scale up that part of our business significantly. You could only do that type of innovation around products and how you position it through specialization.
I 100%, like we're completely
Yeah.
aligned in that area.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So I guess the point for me that I want to make is that innovation comes through specialization because you know what to innovate on and you know who you're innovating for at a deep level.
Absolutely. Like
You know.
your ideas become better and they move from like, we're going to automate our weekly reporting to we are going to connect to this unique interface and we're going to give this insight that no one else can give. It's similar. Like in my space, I can tell you exactly how much to spend if you are a marketing agency in every single area of your business, but I know nothing about inventory. Like if a manufacturer came to me, I don't know how much to spend on capital equipment. I have no knowledge within that area. So my ideas are all around like resource planning and profitability within this specific sector.
How do you approach or think about driving more of a innovative culture at your agency? Like what should a leader do to drive, get more people involved in the innovation and really want to drive that independently of the founder?
So there's a couple of things. So first of all, I'm going to talk about innovation with a lowercase I versus innovation with an uppercase I.
Yeah.
Innovation with an uppercase I is like self-autonomous driving cars. It is, something that, is completely innovative and groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Most of, marketing agencies' innovation is lowercase I. Small incremental improvements to the services. But I think it is absolutely imperative. And I'm going to take it even a step further than just innovation. I believe in this thing I call the pursuit of world class. The idea is that what you want, starting with the CEO and ingrained with your entire company, is that your services every 90 days should be better than it was in the previous 90 days. And when I say services, not just what do you deliver for your customers, it might be the sales and marketing department, it might be the HR department, it might be the finance department. But the idea is that you're building something you're just really proud of. If you sit there and be like, I have a really good service, as you said, like, using your Kisser example, the innovative component that it has, like small 1% incremental improvements compounded over time is a massive, massive
That's right.
improvement. And so I think it really starts with the leader, but you got to reward people for trying new things and making incremental processes better and stronger. And so, we do 90-day planning, and every 90 days we talk about the small incremental improvements we can make so that we feel that at the end of the 90 days, our business is better than it was before the 90 days started.
And how do you think about measurement? Does each area of the business need to have some kind of KPI or measurement that they're trying to improve on as relates to this innovation?
I would love to say yes, but you know, every decision we make is a leap of faith.
Yeah.
Okay. I just gave you an idea that, I probably at some point will take the leap of faith and allocate money towards that idea. And so the idea of data and the idea of having some KPI is great, especially if it helps you take that leap of faith or it reduces the size of that leap. But, there's some things, you walk into the bathroom of your office and you see that it's dirty, like cleaning it. I
Yeah.
don't need a KPI for that. I just know that
Right.
that's going to be better. That's important to do. So I would say that there's an expression of those that are measured is what gets managed. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
important point. But I also think that if you have too many KPIs, it reduces your decision making.
And this is coming from a metrics guy right now. So look, I think you're right. You don't want to the lack of having metrics should not prevent you from investing in innovation.
Yep. So I'll just give you an example. You mentioned in my intro my focus on cash, profit, and revenue, right?
Yes. Right.
And this whole idea of a CPR score. And you asked, how did I come up with that? So I was in a sales pitch about 2 years ago. And the guy was like, I'm pretty sophisticated. I look at 315 KPIs every single day. And my take on that is,
how many hours does that take?
Exactly. If you break it out by second, it's a different KPI per second. But, if you think about it, you can't make any decisions if you're looking at too many things. A lot of people often ask me about compensation, and they want 6 different metrics to give someone a bonus on. I'm like, you get 1, maybe 2, because the human can only process so many things to focus on. And so
true.
As a metrics guy, I went with the opposite approach. I came up with one simple question. What is the least amount of KPIs to look at to help you make decisions?
It. That's great.
No one has been able to come up with a 4th one yet. But I believe there are only 3 metrics that matter. How much cash you have relative to your monthly overhead, your profit margin, and your year-over-year revenue growth. Now, there are other KPIs. I just told you 4 KPIs to increase revenue. Win new clients, increase average order value, churn, and upsells. But that's what's going to impact your year-over-year revenue growth. Yeah. And so everything that you do from an innovative standpoint, I really want you to come back to those 3 metrics: your cash, your profit, and your revenue growth. And how does it improve those 3 metrics? Yeah. And so that's kind of the framework that I'm recommending for people.
That's awesome. It's funny you mentioned about having too many KPIs or too many metrics to follow. It makes me think about certain agencies I've worked with that I've worked in on the sales team, where they have a comp plan where it's you have to, it's 15 different things you have to get right. You have to there's way too many metrics. And in the world of sales teams that don't understand their compensation, how they get paid, are not going to thrive, because if it's too complicated, they're not going to take the time to figure it out. And as a result of that, what you want to do is make a compensation plan for sales team that is extremely intuitive and easy to get, because then you're going to know you're going to have a sales team that understands exactly the behaviors that they need to do in order to be able to get paid not only their commission, but the bonus and the president's club and all those things.
Exactly. And if you create, even when you get to 3 different metrics to focus on, they don't know which one to focus on.
Right.
So the simpler you can make this while still having a data-driven approach, I think is really important.
That's awesome. So, Jon, as it relates to the world of innovation, the work you do, what else should we cover? What area have we not discussed that you think is relevant?
I honestly think that we've gotten the core components. I'll just summarize it again, unless you don't want me to, but ideal client profile, experience and results, 5% of your revenue, dedicated team, either in service design or product development. And if you speak in generalities, you're not there yet. It has to be specifics of what you're going towards.
Beautifully said. Thanks, Jon. I appreciate you coming on. I learned so much. I got tons and tons of notes here. I'll tell you my one of my favorite things that you said was you very eloquently talked about how there's two primary levers, at least in the agency space, where it's experience and profits. If you could be innovative in those areas and continue to improve those, maybe third is profits, but really it's
experience results. You said experience and profits. So it's experience and results.
Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I skipped over it. So experience and results, profit be the third, but the experience and results. As long as you're driving those, then you're improving the business, you're improving the lives of your clients, and overall, you're on the right path.
Corey, thank you for having me here.
Thanks, Jon. Thanks for tuning in to the Deep Specialization podcast. If you haven't checked out my best-selling book, Anyone, Not Everyone, you can download the audiobook for free right now by going to anyoneNotEveryone.com. That's anyoneNotEveryone.com. And finally, a special thank you to our sponsor, E2M. We'll see you in the next episode.